Hey, it's Pete Monfre here. Let's talk about the 5 red flags that tell you your sales process sucks.
You are listening to A Moment of Clarity, the Smash podcast that helps your business make better sales and marketing decisions, drive more leads, and grow beyond your wildest dreams. And now, broadcasting from the backseat of a 72 Nova, your host, Pete Monfre.
Well, welcome to A Moment of Clarity, the Smash podcast. Today we're going to be talking about something that's dear to my heart, and that is sales process. Such an important thing, and there's an issue that I run into really on a regular basis with companies that they just don't have good sales processes. But here's the kicker: they don't know it. They're just doing what they know, what is traditional, what has always been. And I'll tell you something, if your sales process is the same as it was in the 50s or looks anything like the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, everything else in the market has changed. So you might want to look at how you sell. And so I'm going to give you the top 5 issues that I've run across, and red flags is what I call them. It tells me that there can be a lot of improvement had. So the first red flag is you don't have a process. Okay, one of the first things I do when I work with clients is I ask the salespeople to go ahead and draw their process out in a graphical form on a whiteboard. Very seldom are salespeople able to draw a process. They will often draw something, but it isn't a sales process. It might be how leads are handled with their CRM, or it just could be anything. But it isn't a sales process. In other words, an orderly, systematic way where you lead people through the funnel, either disqualify them, qualify them, close them, or lose them. Hopefully close more than lose. So if you feel like you can't describe your process concisely and you can't map it out on a whiteboard. In fact, it's a great exercise to give your sales team next time you have your sales meeting. See if they can map out what their process looks like. If they can't, red flag. Number 2, I hear this anytime I hear anyone say, "Well, sales is just a numbers game." Red flag, big red flag. It's a numbers game. In other words, if you make enough calls, if you talk to enough people, you're going to get those sales, right? No, wrong. In fact, if you believe that, I can tell you right now that you are probably implementing the most inefficient sales process humanly possible. It is not a numbers game anymore, all right? It's because essentially that says quantity over quality, right? No. You should be talking to people who are quality leads, who are somewhat qualified, who have shown interest, not trying to beat their door down, not trying to bust in with your solution and force it on them. That just doesn't work. Let me rephrase that. I call it the slot machine theory, right? It works just enough to keep you putting nickels in that machine. So it does work, but it's just by sheer brute force. And if you start looking at your cost of contact and your cost of acquisition, you're going to find out if that's your primary way of bringing in new business. You got a sales team and they're just hammering it all the time. Your cost of acquisition, and I'll bet you this, it's going to be astronomical. And if you don't know what it is, you should really call me and we'll figure it out real fast. We can figure it out in 15 minutes, all right? It's going to be more than you think if you think that sales is a numbers game. Number 3, you don't have specific metrics in place or processes to track them. Okay, when I hear that, when I say, hey, well, what are the, how do you know, how do you measure your sales team's success? And I hear this, you're going to be surprised. And I'm talking companies between 5 million, 150 million in that mid-range. Really big companies usually can answer that question pretty well. It's really the mid-sized and small businesses that basically say, they can't answer that question. They're not sure. How do they measure sales team success? Sometimes it's just bottom line numbers, but honestly, that seems like a simple question, but too many companies, they can't answer it. If you can't answer that question, it's either that you haven't identified the key metrics. Like I ask a lot about what's your close rate. Okay, and I'll always get a percentage of some kind, but then if I ask, how do you know that's your close rate? That's where it starts to get vague, right? So, and a lot of times it's just that they haven't decided. They know what the metrics are. They just haven't decided which ones they're going to focus on. But the other part of it is they don't have a good process or system to track those metrics. All right, so that makes it really hard to know if you're spending too much, if the sales cycle's unnecessarily long, if there's things that you can change to improve. There's all kinds of things. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So If you can't answer the question, how do you measure, what are the metrics by which you measure your sales program? If you can't answer the question, that's a red flag. This is one that makes salespeople's lives horrible everywhere. And that's that your salespeople, if they're spending a lot of time chasing prospects, chasing them down, what happens in the traditional sales process is that a prospect will really is there to get as much information from you as possible. And as salespeople, we're all too willing to do that. We fall into this trap where we're being reactive to that buyer's process, and we're jumping through hoops, and we're getting a proposal, we're telling all this information, and we're hoping and we're praying it's a sale, and but then we get, let me think about it, or I need to do this thing and bring it to the board, or I need to, there's a million excuses, right? And then then it starts, right? They start hiding on you. You're calling, you're following up, you're emailing, they go silent. You may get them on, then sometimes you catch them, right? And they got a new excuse, right? And then, oh, well, call me in 3 weeks. So we do that. We just keep doing this. And you multiply this by the number of salespeople you have, and they're spending 50%, 60% of their time just following up. And then because you might not have your metrics in place, you don't know how many of those are closing. I can tell you how many. Very, very few of those will close. If you're chasing somebody down for more than a couple weeks, the chance of closing that deal go almost to zero. Okay, so big red flag. Salespeople just spending enormous amounts of time just following up. There's a better way to do that. We're not going to get it into today's podcast. We'll be talking about it on a future podcast. Or you can always contact me as well at claritymarketingsupport.com. I'm happy to share with you some ways that you can quickly change some of these things. Chasing those prospects, man, that'll make your life miserable. It used to make my life miserable. I don't do it anymore. This one, some people might say, what else is there? Are you out of your mind? So number 5 is you spend a lot of time convincing, explaining, telling people about your offering, pushing for to be able to show them whatever it is, but convincing. Hey, if you could just convince them, if you can just give them the logic of why your solution makes sense or your service is going to help them, if you can just get through to them and tell them that the thing should sell itself, if you could just get in front of the right people, and once you get in front of the right people, the thing sells itself. No, it doesn't. Nothing sells itself. If things sold themselves, we wouldn't need salespeople, right? And so if you're trying to convince, you can't convince someone to buy, right? They're going to buy. Also not on our timetable. You can't convince them when to buy either. They're going to buy on their own timetable, right? But if you're trying to convince somebody, there's really only 2 ways to get someone to do something that you want them to do. You can inspire them to do it, or you can force them to do it. Convincing is kind of a way of just forcing them. Instead, you should be asking questions, listening to what they're telling you, not presenting anything really until the time is right, until you really understand what their pain is and what their key issues are. And then when it comes time to present a solution, that you focus on those things. That's not convincing. That's speaking directly to their problems and drawing a straight line to your solution. Totally different things. And again, that should be part of an organized process. So if you're trying to convince, if you're explaining, I think technology companies do this a lot. They're just explaining. Look, man, if it's that hard to understand, you need to be looking at your marketing team as to why they're not doing their job. If you're showing up at a prospect and they don't know who you are and they don't know what you do and they don't know how it works and they don't know who your other customers are and they don't know nothing about you, you should be given the stink eye to marketing because they're not doing your job. You should never show up to a sales call. That prospect should have all the basics, and there should be a reason you're there, right? To qualify them, see if they have budget, see how they make decisions, understand what their pain is, figure out the next step. Okay, if you're doing anything other than that, there's a chance that, not a chance, I think 100% you can improve your process. You can shorten your sales cycle. All the things that I just listed, the 5 things, they extend your sales process way, way out. It kills your close ratios. It costs a ton of money. And so that's today's Moment of Clarity podcast. Very short, very concise, right to the point. I like to be those things. But if you've made it this far, I've got a bonus for you because I like to bring more value. So number 6, the 6th red flag. You don't take no for an answer. I've heard this from so many salespeople. I just don't take no for an answer. Like that's some sort of like virtuous thing, right? That can get you into some trouble, actually. Sometimes you better take no for an answer. But this idea that as salespeople, we can just continue to beat down, beat. We're just never gonna until I have people say, "Hey man, I'm not gonna stop until they tell me to bleep off." Right? I mean, are you crazy? That's a huge red flag, right? In my world and in the world of professional selling, you want no as an answer. I know that sounds crazy, but think about it this way. The faster you can get to no, the faster you can get to yes. Because we know 80% of those deals, sometimes 90%, are going to result in no's. Okay, so the sooner that you can qualify them out, the more time you have to spend with those that you've qualified in, and the faster you get to that yes. So if the answer is no, or if they're trying to avoid you, you can't get an answer, take it as a no, move to the next one, all right? If you don't have enough opportunities, that's a whole different problem. And again, happy to talk about that. This podcast is about the red flags that tell you your sales process probably sucks.
You are listening to A Moment of Clarity, the Smash podcast that helps your business make better sales and marketing decisions, drive more leads, and grow beyond your wildest dreams.